Sure, I'll text when I'm here. 20 years ago, my brother lived by himself about an hour away from where my mom and I lived. I'm much younger than my bro, so was still a child while he was a late teen. We lived in a rural area, while my bro was in the nearest city. Whenever my mom had need to go into the city, she would pick him up and they'd just spend time together. He had a really bad habit on these occasions to wait until she was already there, and then get out of bed, shower, get dressed, and then meet her outside for them to go do whatever they were doing that day, either errands or shopping, etc. This process would take anywhere from 10 minutes to half an hour, which would eat into the time Mom was willing to spend in the city. One day Mom arranged to see him, and he just said, "Okay, just text me when you're here." The next day she texted him, "I'm here," as she was leaving her house an hour away from my bro. So my bro got up, got showered and dressed, and went to stand outside looking for her car. After waiting for about 15 minutes or so, he finally ran her to find out where she was parked. "Mom, parked. I'm not parked anywhere. I'm still driving." "Bro, but you texted me you were here." "Mom, I am here. You're there. I will be there in about 15 minutes. Are you ready?" "Bro, yes, I've been ready for 15 minutes and waiting outside for you." "Mom, oh good. I won't have to wait this time. See you in a moment." On that occasion, Mom was able to get on with her day immediately. In the future, my bro did end up being dressed in time for Mom getting there, but he is still perpetually and habitually late to this day 20 years later. We still talk about this text every time bro is late though. Super late edit. I'm getting the same comments, questions over again, though I wasn't expecting this to gain so much traction. Who does? Just wanted to address these specific repeated comments. Your brother might have ADHD, time blindness. He's capable of being on time for things that have a time limit, like work appointments, etc. But when it comes to social engagements where time is just a concept, not a set thing, he's terrible at. He's learned to live with it over the years. Thankfully, he was on time for his own wedding, though that was mostly to do with his groomsmen more than anything, TBH. Also, ironically, I am the one who is currently being tested for ADHD, so maybe he does, and it's a family thing. IDK. Texting wasn't a thing 20 years ago. First of all, yes, it was. Lots of Americans are coming on here and saying it wasn't in the USA, which I wasn't aware of. I was given my first phone in 2001, and it had been used by my mom for 2 years prior to that, and I had it for another 2 to 3 years afterward too. Yay, Nokia. Besides, not expecting people to be so exacting, I was intentionally inaccurate with the time. This incident happened at the very least 17 years ago, which would have been 2004-ish. I'm pretty sure this happened around 2001 to 2000, sort of time, just going by where my brother was living at the time. This isn't malicious, this isn't compliance. Mom followed my brother's instructions. Text when you're here, without following what he meant. When you're geographically close to my location, with the intention it would inconvenience him in the same manner he'd been continually inconveniencing her, making him wait while she was ready to begin their excursion. I'm pretty sure that is both malicious and compliance. Thanks. Hope this clears some things up, and thank you to those people who've given awards to this small story. I appreciate it.
Next week, I'm going to fire you. Worked for a shitty airline company. Let's just make up a name, United Airlines. At this company, they started a smaller company that could hire and train people to run the planes, but pay them way less at certain airports, where my colleagues at other airports were making over $20 per hour. I was getting paid $10.25 for the same, and sometimes more at work. It honestly would scare you to know how little the people who are the ones that make sure your plane takes off safely are paid. All of us had to do 3 jobs to be able to pay rent, and we were all in the job for the benefits, free flights to anywhere in the country, on standby. Anyway, I had a boss. We'll call him Jim. I could tell many stories on how terrible of a boss he was, but this one has actual malicious compliance. I had to go to the hospital from the airport because of intense pain in my stomach. It turns out that because of stress caused by that job, my intestines decided to stop functioning. Anyway, I spent the day in the hospital, and then they gave me a note saying that I didn't have to work the next 2 days. I told Jim's boss that, since I hated talking to Jim, when I went back into work 3 days later. We had 5 people total to load all luggage, load the water, and push out 5 planes in a little over an hour. Already an incredible amount of work for so few people. We had our morning work meeting to discuss how fucked we were. Then Jim asked me into his office. Your attendance is unacceptable, he said, dumbfounded. I asked what he meant. You've been late a couple of times, and now missing the past 3 days. I said, Jim, I have the note from the hospital. According to work policy, that shouldn't affect my attendance. I don't care what work policy says. I'm going to fire you. And I cited work policy since we were protected by a union. I said, Jim, you have to give me an attendance warning before you're allowed to fire me for attendance. This is the first time I'm hearing about attendance, so you can't fire me right now. Jim said, it doesn't matter. I'm going to give you a warning right now. And when I get back from vacation next week, you're going to be fired. Now go back to work. My decision is final. So I told my coworkers what happened. Then I decided, all right, well, if next week he's firing me, I'll just leave now. Even though their day was about to be fucked, since now 4 people were working 5 planes. They all said, fuck this place, get out of here. So I left and went to get breakfast. This all happened at 4 a.m. As I'm enjoying my meal, Jim calls me. I happily ignore. He calls 3 more times and then texts me asking where I was at. I told him, you fired me. Why would I keep working for you? No response. I tried to soak in the sight of Jim running between planes like a chicken with his head cut off. I don't imagine any plane took off on time that morning. I get a call from HR and the union rep and the general manager, who is Jim's boss. They all said Jim was wrong and asked me if I could come back to work it out. But quitting felt so good, and I felt such weight lifted off my shoulders thinking about not working there anymore. So I never went back. Some more info. Although this isn't so satisfying, it's more a testament of United Airlines' complete lack of ethics. Jim got in really big trouble when he had a guy who had a shoulder injury and had a note, and told Jim several times he couldn't do super heavy labor. Jim sent him to the bag room by himself anyway. Imagine having to lift 300 to 750 to 70-pound bags over your head per hour, all while running between bag carts and the belt. Needless to say, the guy tore his shoulder and had to get surgery on it. They still didn't fire Jim. Instead, they promoted him to manage the workers who did ticketing and no manual labor. As far as I know, Jim still works for United. My coworker still cannot move the way he used to 2 years later.
Only take breaks when I tell you to. Sure, no problem. I used to work at a call center where we would get flooded with calls constantly. This is a story of how a busybody boss thought they understood everything since they were in charge. At the work, we were given a 15-minute breaks and one 45-minute lunch break. The breaks were scheduled into our day so you could see when they would be, but this would change day by day. My role was a bit different than the normal agents, as I was specifically dealing with the higher issue calls. These calls could take up to 1 hour to complete, and the caller would need to stay on the line, unless they were fine with a call back later, but this was rarely the case. Since I never knew when I would be getting these calls, my break times were a shot in the dark if I would or wouldn't be on a call. I would just take them as soon as the call was done if they ever intersected, which they did 99% of the time. Enter my boss. During a performance review, I had all the marks except for attendance. I asked about this as I know I missed a few days, but always with a reasonable update for time frame and never had a no-show day. Where there is no warning that I'm not coming in, my boss stated that attendance also applies to break and lunch times, and since I rarely took them at the requested time, I was getting written up. I explained my role, that they hired me for, and the challenges involved. They did not care and stated I needed to take breaks when I was told to. I asked for them to send me an email so that I could print it out, put it on my desk, and never forget again. My boss smiled ear to ear, probably because they thought I was groveling at that point. And sure enough, they did, stating in the email, "You must take your breaks only when the schedule tells you to. No time else. There is no excuse." I saved it, printed it out, sent a copy to my own email, and followed it to the letter. Next call that happened, that same day, of course, had the long call crossing over with a break issue. I asked the customer if it would be okay for a call back. They said no. I stated that unfortunately I cannot stay on the line as I am required to take my break. They became enraged and demanded to speak with my boss. I told my boss. They said that I need to apologize and finish the call. I showed them the email they just sent to me and said, "You told me to take my break at this time no matter what. I'm just doing what you told me to do." I'm taking my break. Would you like the customer transferred over? Or should I just hang up? They took the call over, and from that day on I never had a missed attendance mark. Busybody bosses are the worst.
How my 8th grade math teacher thought corporate greed and negligence were the power of gummy bears. I know that's a wild ride of a title, but I promise it's all true, so buckle up. When I was in 8th grade, I was in the first year of an experimental technology school. I had a class of about 180 8th graders, 12 to 14-year-olds, and about 10 teachers, so everybody shared the same math teacher. For our first semester, we used a software called Gauge. It was all right for most classes, but it was absolutely atrocious when it came to math. Nothing worked with math. We were supposed to use the lessons they had, but it just didn't work. Math symbols didn't show up right, and some questions even had the wrong answer marked. Our math teacher wasn't allowed to just move to paper, and the company insisted that the problem was that our math teacher was older and just didn't understand technology. They said that if she had a genuine issue to email them. One day, I get to class, and there are 7 email addresses written on the board. She told us that we were going to go through our math lesson today, and take screenshots of every mistake we found and email them to the company's executives. 1 screenshot equals 1 email. 10 emails equals a packet of gummy bears. We had a blast trying to send as many emails as we could. One kid got 10 packets of gummy bears by end of the hour class. At lunch, the principal called my teacher aside and asked for her to stop. She said, "Hell no, my afternoon classes haven't had fun yet." Long story short, our school district got all of its money back from using the software, and the company no longer exists, or they changed their brand out of shame. IDK. I just can't find them anymore. TLDR, the software company said to email if she found an actual issue. So she had an army of either graders inspired by gummy bears, sent thousands of emails to the CEO and other executives.
Like and subscribe for more excellent videos.